Moving the contents of events. You can move the content of an event without changing its position in the project window. Procedure. Hold down Ctrl/CMD-Alt/Opt, click the event and drag to the left or right. Note. You can change the default modifier key for slip event content in the Select Tool category of the Preferences dialog Editing Tool Modifiers page. Result. The content of the event is moved. Note. You cannot move the content of an audio event past the start or the end of the actual audio clip. If the event plays the whole clip, you cannot move the content at all. You can set up key commands for slip event content left and slip event content right in the Edit category of the Key Commands dialog to move the content of events to the left or to the right. Related links. Setting up tool modifier keys. Follow-up. Grouping events. Grouping events. You can treat several events on the same or different tracks as one unit by grouping them. Procedure. Select the events and select Edit Group. Result. The events are grouped. This is indicated by an icon. Moving the contents of events. Grouped events. Grouped events. If you edit one of the grouped events in the project window, this affects all other events in the group as well. Group editing operations include selecting, moving and duplicating, resizing, adjusting fade in and fade out audio events only, splitting, locking, muting, deleting, related links, fades, crossfades, and envelopes. Grouping events. Group editing mode. Group editing mode. The group editing mode for folder tracks allows you to edit parts and events in a folder as a group. If group editing is activated and you select an event, a part or a range on a track inside the folder track, other events, parts, or ranges that have the same start and end time and the same playback priority are also selected and temporarily grouped. This allows you to edit different drum tracks for bass drum, snare, and toms at the same time, for example. Temporary grouping means that on every new selection with the Object Selection or the Range Selection tool, Cubase looks for corresponding events or parts inside the folder and groups them. If you edit the start or the end point of a single event or part before activating the group editing mode, the event or part is excluded from the group. Edit actions in group editing mode affect all grouped events, parts, or ranges. If you select another take by using the To Front submenu, all other tracks inside the edit group also switch to the corresponding take. This is useful for comparing takes of a multi-track recording. If phase coherent audio warp is activated, the relation between all tracks inside the folder track remains intact when performing audio warp operations. This is useful, for example, for warping multi-microphone recordings with crosstalk or premixed multi-channel audio. Note. Group editing overrides any regular group settings in the edit group. Phase coherent audio warp editing requires events with the same start point and length and only allows for warp markers at the same time positions. If the events in your edit group do not meet these requirements, activating phase coherent audio warp opens a warning message. Click Bounce to bounce the events of your edit group in order to create files that allow phase coherent editing. Related links. Folder track controls. Muting events. Organizing tracks in folder tracks. Grouped events. Performing group editing. Performing group editing. You can group events and parts on multiple tracks that have the same start and end time and the same playback priority to edit them together. Procedure. In the Global Track Controls area of the track list, click Add Track. Click Folder. Click Add Track. Move the tracks that contain the events that you want to edit as a group into the folder track. In the track list for the folder track, activate Group Editing. Optional, if you want to perform audio warp operations, activate Phase Coherent Audio Warp. Result. All events, parts, or ranges inside the folder that have the same start and end time and the same playback priority are temporarily grouped. Related links. Folder track controls. Group editing mode. Locking events. Locking events. If you want to make sure that you do not edit or move an event by accident, you can lock it. Procedure. Do one of the following. Select the events and select Edit Lock to lock the selected events. Click the padlock button in the track list or in the inspector to lock all events on a track. Result. The events are locked. This is indicated by a padlock symbol. To unlock an event, select the event and select Edit Unlock. Performing group editing. Lock event attributes dialog. Lock event attributes dialog. The lock event attributes dialog allows you to lock specific event attributes. To open the lock event attributes dialog, select a locked event and select Edit Lock. Position locked. Activate this to prevent the event from being moved. Size locked. Activate this to prevent the event from being resized. Others locked. Activate this to prevent the event from being edited. This includes adjusting the fades and event volume, processing, etc. Note. You can also set these attributes in the Preferences dialog editing page. Related links. Lock event attributes. Locking events. Inverting the phase of audio events. Inverting the phase of audio events. You can invert the phase of audio events in the project window. Procedure. In the project window, select one or multiple audio events. On the info line, click the Invert Phase field. Result. The phase of the events is inverted. This is reflected on the info line. Related links. Info line. Lock event attributes dialog. Muting events. Muting events. You can mute events in the project window. Muted events can be edited as usual with the exception of adjusting fades, but they cannot be played back. Procedure. Do one of the following. Select the Mute tool and click the events or drag a selection rectangle around them. Select the events and select Edit Mute. Result. The events are muted and grayed out. You can unmute events by selecting them and selecting Edit Unmute. Related links. Project window toolbar. Inverting the phase of audio events. Exporting MIDI parts as MIDI files. Exporting MIDI parts as MIDI files. You can export MIDI parts as MIDI files. Procedure. In the project window, select the MIDI part that you want to export. Drag the MIDI part to the File Explorer/macOS Finder. Result. A corresponding MIDI file is exported. The export options for MIDI files are taken into account. Related links. Export options dialog for MIDI files. Muting events. Exporting selected events. Exporting selected events. You can render selections or range selections of audio events and/or MIDI parts and export the rendered material as .wav files. Procedure. Select one or more audio events and/or MIDI parts or make a range selection. Select File, Export selected events. In the Export selected events dialog, specify the render options. Click Export. Result. All selected source material is processed according to your render settings. Your render options are saved and used for all further render operations. Exporting MIDI parts as MIDI files. Export selected events dialog. Export selected events dialog. The Export selected events dialog allows you to render selections or range selections of audio events and/or MIDI parts and to export the rendered material as .wav files. To open the Export selected events dialog, select an event in the project window and select File, Export selected events. The following settings are available in the Mode section. As separate events. Creates one or more tracks that contain separate events or parts that are saved as separate audio files. As block events. Creates one or more tracks that contain adjacent events/parts that are combined so that they become blocks. Every block is saved as a separate audio file. As one event. Creates one or more tracks that contain the events/parts and combines them so that they become one event/part. Every combination is saved as a separate audio file. The following settings are available in the processing section. Dry. Copies all effects and panner settings to new audio tracks. The resulting audio tracks keep the formats of their source tracks. A mono track results in a mono track, for example. Channel settings. Renders all effects into the resulting audio files. This includes insert effects, channel strip settings, group channel settings, and FX send channel settings. Panner settings are transferred to the new audio tracks. The resulting audio tracks keep the formats of their source tracks. A mono track results in a mono track, for example. Complete signal path. Renders the complete signal path into the new audio files, including all channel settings, group channel settings, FX send channel settings, and panner settings. The new audio track is created without effects. Stereo balance panner settings are activated. The resulting audio file format is determined by the output channel of the source track. A mono track that is routed to a stereo bus results in a stereo audio file. Complete signal path plus master FX. Renders the complete signal path and the master bus settings into the resulting audio files. This includes all channel settings, group channel settings, FX send channel settings, and panner settings. The resulting audio file format is determined by the output channel of the source track. A mono track that is routed to a stereo bus results in a stereo audio file. The following settings are available in the Properties section. Tail mode. Allows you to set the tail mode to bars and beats, seconds, or off. Tail size. Allows you to set a tail length for the rendered files. This adds time at the end of the rendered file to allow reverb and delay tails to fully fade out. Bit depth. Allows you to set the bit depth for the resulting file. The following settings are available in the File Name Settings section. Use custom name. Activates the use of custom names for the rendered files. Name. Allows you to enter a custom name for the rendered files. The following settings are available in the File Location section. File path. Allows you to select a custom folder to which the resulting .wav files are rendered. Mix down to one audio file. Creates one audio file from all of your source material. This option is only available if several tracks are selected and dry transfer channel settings is deactivated. Related links. Naming scheme dialog. Exporting selected events. Naming scheme dialog. Naming scheme dialog. The naming scheme dialog allows you to define naming schemes for the audio material that you want to export. To open the naming scheme dialog, select an event in the project window, select File, Export selected events, and click Open Naming Scheme window. Scheme. Allows you to save and delete naming schemes. Attributes. Holds the following naming scheme attributes. Name. Adds the text you entered on the Export selected events dialog in the name field to the resulting file name. Note. The resulting file name only contains the text in the name field of the file name settings in the Export selected events dialog if you did not define a naming scheme. If the naming scheme contains attributes, the file name corresponds to the naming scheme. Project name. Adds the project name to the resulting file name. Free text. Allows you to enter free text. Folder path. Adds the folder path of the events from the track list to the resulting file name. Track name. Adds the track name of the audio event or MIDI part to the resulting file name. Event name. Adds the event name of the audio event or MIDI part to the resulting file name. Counter. Adds a number to the resulting file name. Result. Allows you to drop attributes for the file name and to rearrange them by dragging. Settings. Allows you to select separator and counter settings. Separator. Divides attributes from each other. Counter. The value from which the counter starts counting. Digits. The number of digits of the counter value. Preview. Displays a preview of your current settings. Related links. Defining naming schemes. Entering free text. Export selected events dialog. Defining naming schemes. Defining naming schemes. You can define naming schemes by setting up attributes. Attributes determine the structure of the file name of the exported audio files. Prerequisite. The Export selected events dialog is open and mixed down to one track is deactivated. Procedure. In the Export selected events dialog, click Open Naming Scheme window. The naming scheme dialog opens. Open the scheme pop-up menu and select New Scheme. Optional, double-click the name in the field and enter a name. Double-click an attribute in the Attributes field to add it to the result field. You can also drag an attribute and drop it in the result field. Note: each attribute is available only once except for the free text attribute. You can set up a maximum of 7 attributes. To remove an attribute, click its X icon. Optional, to change the order of attributes, drag an attribute to the left/right in the result field. Click OK. Result: the naming scheme is saved and applied on export. Related links. Entering free text. Naming scheme dialog. Entering free text. Entering free text. You can enter free text that is added to the file name of the exported audio files. Prerequisite: the Export Selected Events dialog is open and mixed down to 1 track is deactivated. Procedure: in the Export Selected Events dialog, click Open Naming Scheme window. The Naming Scheme dialog opens. Open the Scheme pop-up menu and select New Scheme. Double-click the free text attribute to add it to the result field. In the result field, double-click the free text label and enter the text that you want to add. Press Return to confirm your changes. Click OK. Result: the text that you entered is added to the file name scheme and applied on export. Defining naming schemes. Saving naming schemes. Saving naming schemes. You can save several naming schemes in the Naming Scheme window. Saved naming schemes are displayed on the Scheme pop-up menu. Every change that you make to the active naming scheme is saved immediately. Procedure: define a naming scheme by adding attributes to the result field. Enter separator and counter settings. To rename the naming scheme, double-click its name in the field, type in the new name and press Enter. Entering free text. Range editing. Range editing. Editing in the project window is not restricted to handling whole events and parts. You can also work with selection ranges, which are independent from the event/part and track boundaries. Saving naming schemes. Creating a selection range. Creating a selection range. Procedure: on the project window toolbar, select Range Selection. Do one of the following. Draw a selection rectangle around the range that you want to select. Select Edit Select and select one of the menu functions. Double-click an event to create a selection range that encompasses it. Note: if you hold down Shift and double-click several events in a row, you can create a selection range that encompasses several events. Related links. Select Menu for selection ranges. Combine selection tools mode. Range editing. Select Menu for selection ranges. Select Menu for selection ranges. If the range selection tool is selected, the Select submenu features specific options for selecting ranges in the project window. To open the Range Selection Options menu, select the Range Selection tool and select Edit Select. All makes a selection that covers all tracks from the start of the project to the end. You can define the track length with the project duration setting in the Project Setup dialog. None removes the current selection range. Invert inverts the selection. All selected events are deselect, and all events that were not selected are selected. Only used for event selection. In loop makes a selection between the left and right locator on all tracks. From start to cursor makes a selection on all tracks from the start of the project to the project cursor. From cursor to end makes a selection on all tracks from the project cursor to the end of the project. Equal pitch all octaves. This function requires that you select a single note. It selects all notes of this part that have the same pitch in any octave as the selected note. Equal pitch same octave. This function requires that you select a single note. It selects all notes of this part that have the same pitch and the same octave as the selected note. Select controllers in note range. Selects the controllers within the note range. All on selected tracks. Selects all events on the selected track. Only used for event selection. Events under cursor. Selects all events on the selected tracks that are touched by the project cursor. Select event. This is available in the sample editor. Left selection side to cursor. Moves the left side of the current selection range to the project cursor position. Right selection side to cursor. Moves the right side of the current selection range to the project cursor position. Range to next event. Moves the selection range to the next event head or tail on the selected tracks and turns the selection range to a 0 selection. Range to previous event. Moves the selection range to the previous event head or tail on the selected tracks and turns the selection range to a 0 selection. Enlarge range to next event. Moves the right side of the current selection range to the next event head or tail on the selected tracks. Enlarge range to previous event. Moves the left side of the current selection range to the previous event head or tail on the selected tracks. Related links. Project Setup dialog. Selecting with the Object Selection tool. Select submenu. Creating a selection range. Selecting ranges for several tracks. Selecting ranges for several tracks. You can create selection ranges that cover several tracks. It is also possible to exclude tracks from a selection range. Procedure. Create a selection range from the first to the last track. Press Ctrl/CMD-Alt/Opt. In the selection range, click on the tracks that you want to exclude from the selection. Select Menu for selection ranges. Editing selection ranges. Editing selection ranges. You can edit selection ranges, that is, adjust their size, move or duplicate them, split them, etc. Selecting ranges for several tracks. Adjusting the size of selection ranges. Adjusting the size of selection ranges. You can adjust the size of a selection range. Prerequisite. You have created a selection range. Choices. Drag the edges of the selection range vertically or horizontally. Hold down Shift and click where you want to extend/reduce the size of the selection range. The closest selection range edge is moved to the position at which you clicked. On the info line, adjust the values for range start, range end, range length, top track or bottom track. Use the buttons nudge start left, nudge start right, nudge end left or nudge end right in the nudge section of the project window toolbar. The edges are moved by the amount specified on the grid pop-up menu or by the amount set on the nudge settings pop-up menu. Use the key commands in the nudge category of the key commands dialog. Use Alt/Op left arrow, the default key command for nudge start left. Use Alt/Op right arrow, the default key command for nudge start right. Use Alt/Op shift left arrow, the default key command for nudge end left. Use Alt/Op shift right arrow, the default key command for nudge end right. Use Alt/Op down arrow, the default key command for nudge bottom down. Use Alt/Op shift up arrow, the default key command for nudge bottom up. Use Alt/Op shift down arrow, the default key command for nudge top down. Use Alt/Opt up arrow, the default key command for nudge top up. Related links. Nudge category. Set up context menus. Moving events with the nudge buttons. Resizing events with the nudge buttons. Resizing events using the nudge settings. Nudge. Editing selection ranges. Moving selection ranges. Moving selection ranges. You can move selection ranges and their contents to a new position. Prerequisite. You have created a selection range. Procedure. Click the selection range and drag it to a new position. Result. The contents of the selection range are moved to the new position. If the range intersected events or parts, these are split before moving so that only the sections within the selection range are affected. Related links. Nudging selection ranges. Creating a selection range. Duplicating events. Adjusting the size of selection ranges. Nudging selection ranges.